All right, so talking about volume here, volume is the space that a figure occupies. In other words, it's kind of how much room it takes up total. And so when we talk about volume, we'll talk about it in like cubic measurements. So like a cubic inch is like a little cube that's 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. So it's a 1 inch cube. All right. And so we're asking ourselves in terms of a three-dimensional shape, well, how many little three-dimensional cubes can fit inside of this thing? And that's where we get cubic measurements. That's volume. Okay. For volume of a prism or a cylinder, and first of all, let's remind ourselves, let's talk about prisms and cylinders here. A prism is basically a shape where we have two sides that are the same and they're just connected, okay? So like something like this guy, here's a triangle, and then an identical triangle, and if I connect those two triangles to make a three-dimensional shape, well, that's a prism. Okay? And so when we talk about a prism, it's a three-dimensional shape made by, well, two sides that are the same that are being connected. I could have a rectangular prism or even a square prism. So here's a square and a square. And if I were to connect those two squares, well, that gives me a rectangular or a square prism. Okay? And then a cylinder is the same thing, except the shapes that we're connecting are circles. So here, if I have a circle, and then down here, if I have another circle, and I connect those two circles, well, what I get is a cylinder, okay? And so that's the idea here. When we think about prisms, thinking about boxes, okay? And yeah, we have all kinds of weird shaped boxes. You know, I've seen boxes that look like this triangular thing before. I've seen boxes that look more like this rectangular thing before. But when we think about a prism, we think about a box, okay? Two shapes that are the same being connected. A cylinder is just a special version of that thing, okay? And so now when we talk about the volume of this, the volume of either of these things is the area of the base times the height. So when we look at this, the base, and there's two things that are important here. In terms of identifying the base and the height, that capital B represents the area of the base, and this H represents the height. For a prism or a cylinder, the base is represented by the two shapes that are the same, those two congruent shapes that are connected. So like in this particular example over here, these triangles, those would be the bases. And so when we're talking about the area of the base, it has to be the area of one of those triangles. And then the height will always be the value that connects the two bases. So like in this one, the height would be any one of these lines that connects those two triangles. Likewise here, the bases would be these guys, okay? It would be these squares, these rectangles, because those are the identical shapes, all right? And then the height would be, well, the pieces that connect those. So it would be the line, any one of those lines that connects those two bases, okay? For a cylinder, the base would be these guys. It would be these circles, okay? So the identical shapes represent the bases, and then the height, well, the height of this thing is going to be the piece that connects those, okay? So that's the first thing we have to identify, all right? For example, if I look at something like this guy, if I were to consider the top of this thing and the bottom of this thing my bases, I've got two rectangles that are the same. So let's say these are the bases. So those two rectangles are the same. Those are my bases. Well, then the height of this thing would be the 4, because that's the measurement that connects the two bases. That's the measurement on the line that connects the two bases, okay? And so as I look at this thing, I have to find the area of the base. So to get volume, area of the base, that's what that capital B represents, times the height. And so on this one, the area of the base, well, because the base is a rectangle, the area of the base is length times width, okay? And so the area of the base for this one is 10 square feet, okay? And so coming back over here to my volume formula, that's going to be 10 square feet times h, the height this time, which is 4. And so when I multiply this, I get 40, and my units are going to be cubic feet. And that's because we had square feet times another foot, so now I have 3 kind of feet measurements being multiplied. It's cubic feet, okay? So again, it doesn't matter what shape it is in terms of the prism. It could be a triangular prism, rectangular prism. I identify the base, and I say, what's the area of the shape of this base? And I'll times the height, okay? The base are the identical sides. The height is the measurement that connects those sides.